Drum samples have effectively changed the face of modern music as we know it, and almost everyone is using them now. But what you might not know is that most people don't know how to use them properly. Let's fix that. Today I want to show you how to use drum samples, or more specifically, how to use them correctly, because most people don't get this right. It's a very simple fix in principle, but it's also very easy to miss, especially if you don't know what you're looking for. Now to do this, you and I are going to have to talk about what drum sampling is and how to actually implement it. I'll show you how most people do it, and then I'll also show you how to do it correctly. So click subscribe and let's jump into it. So what is drum sampling? Drum sampling or sample replacement is a term most often used to describe the process of taking a pre-recorded drum sound and layering it on top of your own drums in your own mix. For example, you could take this snare and then turn it into this snare. Fun fact, that replacement snare sound you just heard is actually from one of my own sample packs, and that's available at the link down below in the description. So as you can see, this is pretty powerful stuff, and it seems pretty easy. Well, not so fast. We need to talk about how to use drum samples. Technically, drum sampling can be achieved relatively easily by just manually copying and pasting a sample in line with each hit that you wish to replace. But that's how the cavemen did it. Don't get me wrong, that's an effective way to do it, but it's also extremely labor intensive. Nowadays, we can let machines do it for us, but it's not quite that simple. Keep watching. The most popular sample replacement software is probably Steven Slate's Trigger 2. This plugin analyzes your audio in real time and fires the sample of your choosing with each detected hit. It's incredibly useful and intuitive, and it's actually the same plugin I use in my own mixes. So okay, it sounds simple enough. Place trigger on the track of your choosing, choose your sample, adjust the parameters as needed, and you're done, right? Not quite. Because now we need to talk about the mistake people are making and what they're missing, and also how to fix it. The problem with sample replacement plugins is that they're just not as accurate as they first seem. They can get you very close, and for some that might be enough, but for a professional mix, it's not. So what do I mean by accurate? When you zoom in on a waveform of a recorded drum, you'll see that it's pretty hard to actually tell where the start of a hit is. There's a lot of other noise going, and it can be hard to pinpoint what the actual hit is and what might be bleed from another instrument still decaying. This is where machines fail. They simply don't do a very good job at choosing the start of a hit. This can be a huge deal because if our sample plays out of time from our recorded drums, we're going to have phase issues. We're also going to have timing issues, which can result in flamming drum sounds and stuff like that, and your drummer will not be happy with that. Worse yet, this issue could actually vary from hit to hit, which essentially means that we can't have a consistent drum sound at all. In most cases, this will translate to a thinner drum sound, but in some cases, this could even be an audible flam. So now you know what the issue is and that most people are just throwing a sampler on their track and assuming it's working, but now you need to know how to fix it. The trick to getting your sampler to trigger correctly is actually pretty simple. Just don't let it listen to the drums. So what does that mean? Well, let's consider what a sampler actually needs to know to do its job. It comes down to two things: the timing of your performance and the dynamics of your drum performance. In other words, when and how loud. Which means that the key to getting your sampler to behave is just telling it when and how loud, and we don't have to use the drum track to do that. Let me show you how I do it. I've loaded up a session to show you how I do this, but first a quick note. There are many ways to complete this process. You could do it through a variety of different tools. I'm sure your DAW might even have something built in, so look into that. But this is how I do it. It works. It doesn't really matter how you do it as long as it gets done. But do stick around to the end of the video because I do want to talk about when you should actually do this. I don't want people wasting their time either. That all said, knowledge is power. Let's get into it. So to provide Slate Trigger, the sampler that I use with the information that I need, again, that is when and how loud, I use a plugin called Massey DRT. Massey DRT will analyze the audio that I send into it much like Slate Trigger will, but it'll also let me adjust it. The markers that it generates are called Keyspikes. This is crucial because as you can see, when you scan audio, it doesn't do a perfect job. These big hits are the snares, and these little hits in between are actually misfires. This can be easily corrected by just adjusting some parameters to get us a lot closer as a starting point. The software also analyzes the dynamics of the signal I fed it, and I find that it actually does a good job at that, and I'm rarely needing to mess with it. On occasion, it might miss a hit, but that's no big deal. You can just manually add it. Now, the most crucial step is going through and making sure that each key spike is perfectly aligned, sample accurate with the actual hits of your drum performance. So the easiest way to do that is just to tab the transient through each hit of your drum performance. And as you do that, you will see the markers pop up inside of Massey DRT. And occasionally, like this here, we'll see that it is not where it should be. It looks quite a bit further than, say, this hit does. When we click on it, it zooms in to show us exactly where our marker is placed. So I'll go back to that misfire hit and let's see how far off I am again. So it is way early, and that would have resulted in a really bad sounding snare hit, because you have to remember, even if we fully replace the close mic, the snare still exists in our overheads and our rooms and bleed of all the other drum kits. So getting the timing right is crucial. So all we do is click it, and we drag it over right to where that hit actually happens. And then we keep going. We tab to transient and look for these yellow markers that align right with the start of our hit. And we can click on it, zoom in, make sure, but generally it is good to go. Oh, we had an early one there. Just a little earlier this time, but it's got to be perfect. And that's it. Once that's done, I go to my new sample track and I click render. I can then move this out of the way. And as you can see, I now have keyspikes showing on this top track that represent when and how loud for my sampler. They're just little audio blips generated from Massey DRT. So this is what they sound like. It doesn't matter what they sound like because they're only being used to trigger the sample we want. And as you can hear, there's zero bleed or anything else that could confuse our sampler. So it's just an exact hit that will make sure our samples play sample accurate. So if I open Trigger and have a sample loaded and click play, we will see our key spikes showing in the analyzer window now. As a rule of thumb, I like to make it as sensitive as possible so that it fires at any audio signal. Make no mistake, doing this across a whole drum track for multiple drums takes a lot of time. It's very labor intensive, but if we are after professional results, this is just a step we need to take. I actually just like doing it so much that I hired an assistant engineer to prep my mixes for me and do this process. But it is very important to me that it does get done and that it is accurate. As you've seen, I like to use audio key spikes to trigger my samples, but you can actually use MIDI as well. So if you are into MIDI, that might be an even better way for you to go. I've just found Pro Tools to be a little shaky with MIDI and unreliable, so audio is the way to go for me. Now there's one more thing you need to hear. This is only worth doing if it's for a final professional mix. If you're just messing around, making demos with your band, or just rough mixes for the time being, this step is so not worth doing, especially if you know that you're gonna have to do it again later if you edit the drums or change anything. Just don't do it. It's not fun, it's not inspiring, it's only for the final product. So generally, it's something that's going to get done by your mix engineer. If you're hiring a professional mix engineer, they'll probably do this. But if you are mixing yourself and you want to put out a professional product, this step is 100% worth doing. The takeaway is that you should know how to do it and make sure that it is getting done, but also know when to do it. I don't want everybody just wasting their time doing this for their demos. Now, one little bonus to you learning this that I hadn't thought about to now is that key spikes are actually one of the most powerful mixing tools around. They can be used to control all sorts of things like noise gates, multi-band compressors, sidechain ducking. Pretty much anything sidechain related can be controlled by key spikes. So there's going to be more videos on this coming down. It's one of the more advanced techniques that people are using, but it is so powerful as well. And you have now just touched the tip of the iceberg. Anyways, I hope you enjoyed this video and found it educational, and I hope you're not too overwhelmed by this either. If you have any questions, drop them in the comments below and I'll do my best to get back to you. Please click subscribe and help me grow this channel as well. It is so appreciated. This video was also brought to you by the Self-Recording Band podcast. If you are a DIY recording band, you should absolutely check it out on any of your favorite podcasting apps. And last but not least, if you're now all fired up about drum sounds, do check out my other video about how to distort drums and make them sound really cool.